Record-setting high water has raised erosion concerns around the Great Lakes Basin, prompting some shoreline communities to rethink their policies on waterfront construction and shoreline armoring. The next story is a collaboration with Bridge, Michigan.
Residents in communities along the Great Lakes have been battling up and down water levels for generations. Water levels hit all-time lows in 2013, and then in 2019, new highs were recorded all around the Great Lakes, and water levels have remained high ever since. Brant Rousseau is the supervisor of Port Austin Township at the tip of Michigan's thumb. He's also a member of the Port Austin Planning Commission.
There's been damage to private property. People have lost land. There's been serious erosion. We've had problems with our public parks, both state-owned parks, county parks, and municipal parks. Damage to structures, and overall, we've seen that we haven't had a plan in place to try to deal with some of these issues as best we could.
Port Austin Township is one of only a handful of coastal communities along the Great Lakes that are working to revise their master plans to address issues of erosion.
There's a panic. The residents are taking matters into their own hands, right? With or without permits, all over the state.
We headed out with Brant and charter fishing captain Ray Boswell to survey the Lake Huron shoreline just off of Grindstone City near Port Austin. We were joined by Kelly House, an environmental reporter for Bridge Magazine, who has done extensive reporting on erosion along the Great Lakes.
How does it feel to you as a community leader to see the pain that your community is going through right now?
I've been at the coastline with some of our residents, literally whose front porch is about to go into the lake. Mm-hmm. And with that comes the fear that the house is next. You'll have people starting to have to move their houses, like is happening in places throughout the state.
Along the shoreline, many are hoping for a return to normal, but there's really no normal place for the water's edge. It's a moving target. Guy Meadows is the director of the Marine Engineering Laboratory at Michigan Technological University's Great Lakes Research Center.
The Great Lakes are relatively new features, geologically speaking. They're very steep-sided and deep, and the natural process is to broaden those basins and to begin to fill in the deep parts of the lake. And that background process we call background erosion. The lakes are getting wider, the shore is moving landward at about 1 foot per year for Lake Michigan's and Lake Huron.
That background erosion can be concealed by the rise and fall of the lakes, which makes the beaches shrink and swell. But the long-term trend is clear.
You are always losing shoreline in the long term. It's very hard to perceive that because it happens on scales that are on the order of 15 to 30 years.
For decades, a common way of responding to erosion has been shoreline armoring, usually with a seawall made of steel or stone. Tony Gutierrez lives along the lake in Grindstone City. Over the past 2 years, he's piled more than 200 tons of rock on an existing break wall in an effort to keep the waves at bay. Even with all that stone, Tony knows the winter may bring a wave of new challenges.
Yeah, we're a little concerned about the ice. The ice flows can get, pretty massive here. And this is the highest the water's been since we've been here. And going into the winter, we're expecting to have some issues with ice up against the shore. It's going to move some of that rock a little bit, but, Mother Nature has the last laugh. I mean, it's just the way it is.
But shoreline armoring isn't really a permanent solution. The problem is that armoring the shoreline can actually make erosion worse. Steel and stone don't absorb or dissipate wave energy, they reflect it. And that reflected wave energy can move beach sand off the shore and out into the lake.
So on a natural beach, as water level rises and storm energy rises, the beach readjusts itself in terms of its slope and the placement of offshore sandbars to be as dissipative as possible to that new environment. If we come along and plunk in armoring or a jetty or some alteration of that shoreline, that inhibits the beach's ability to naturally adjust itself for the incoming changes in wave conditions.
Ironically, in the long run, shoreline armoring will destroy the very beach it's intended to protect. But homeowners have few options when it comes to preserving their property. As Kelly House has reported, the state of Michigan has granted more than 2,200 seawall permits in the past year. That's more than 3 times the number it granted the year before.
For a lot of these people, it becomes, a push and pull between this immediate need to not have your home fall into the lake and the long-term consequences of the decisions we make now that can ultimately worsen erosion over time or simply just not work long-term. So if you're one of those landowners, it's something that people are having to grapple with. And it's something that communities are grappling with on the larger scale as they do these planning processes.
Many communities, like Port Austin Township, don't have rules in place for how close a home can be built to the water. So now, they're reevaluating their planning policies, trying to support local landowners and at the same time protect the beaches that are vital to their tourism industry.
So for all these years, we've drifted along without a policy on how close can you build to the lake. Well, when the water's low, you have all this extra real estate, you can walk along the seashore, and now that the water's high, people are now having to deal with the fact that they built far too close to the shoreline.
Solutions may include creating ordinances that require new homes to set back from the shoreline as much as possible, and for new homes to be small enough to be moved if and when it becomes necessary. Dick Norton, a professor of urban and regional planning at the University of Michigan, is working with officials in Port Austin and coastal communities throughout the state to develop master plans that reflect the need to preserve the beaches.
So the first thing we ought to do is think carefully about the places that have not yet developed and make sure that we don't make the problem worse. The second step is to think through for the places that have armored, what do we do now? Do we tell them you're going to have to take that armoring out at some point? Do we tell them you can keep it there, but you can't repair it? So nature is going to keep working on those seawalls, and they're going to fail eventually. And maybe what we say is you can enjoy your property while you have it and enjoy that seawall while you have it. But when the time comes that it's failing, then you need to take it out and try and get back to a natural shoreline. Or do we just decide the folks who have armored, all right, you're done it, you've got it, you can just keep it armored and do that knowing we're probably going to lose the beach?
Only a handful of the more than 300 coastal communities in Michigan have started the process of creating plans to deal with erosion issues. But increased awareness may be critical as communities face tough choices moving forward.
I think people are much more aware of the physical processes that are ongoing and the impact on the shoreline. There's been tremendous interest in preserving the public trust beach, preserving the beach as a beach where people can enjoy and walk and picnic and swim with relative safety, and not to create an armored shoreline that exists from the Straits of Mackinac to the Indiana border. So I think there is much more awareness of the long-term impacts than there ever have been before. So I think I'm optimistic that we will change our view of how we occupy the shoreline.
At Great Lakes Now, we aim to cover the Great Lakes region and the people who live here, like you. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for a newsletter at greatlakesnow.org.